update on the Nancy Drew situation for like, I'm gonna hold off on the Nick and Nancy part, but I have to say I had so much fun watching this episode. Episode 6 is a ride, and I enjoyed it.
I remembered this episode just visually. I knew there was an episode coming up from when I first watched it in 2019 of this house party and all those like lights and that like the the glamour of it. I had that in my mind and I was like, when does this episode come up? And I remember not, I'm sorry, I remember not liking it when I first watched it. But on the second watch, it is an episode.
It is. It's so much fun. I think they really leaned heavily into the rich people are weird and they do criminal things all the time trope, and the way that it's both funny and not funny, which is something that Nancy Drew does really well. Like they do sort of like um make lighthearted jokes about the some of the rich people situations in Horseshoe Bay, but at the same time they do take it seriously that, hey, so it's possible that one of these families off to somebody else and are trying to hide it. But it also involves Roman coins from a ship that sunk into the bottom of the ocean called the, was it the Bonnie Scott? Just so it can be a little
I
bit
don't know.
ridiculous.
Who's doing it like Nancy Drew? Like honestly, no, I remember seeing photos of this episode. I don't know whether it was years ago or recently. It's just I remember this episode visually, and I have to say it was a lot of fun. And no, I do agree with you. It was very much like kind of both tones. It was like, would you see what rich people get up to? And then on the same side, wait a minute, is that what rich people get up to? So it had like a mixture of tones. And but I think it was also one of the most important as far as answers go. We did learn a lot about the Lucy
Yeah.
Sable situation,
Mm-hmm.
how it happened, and that there's more to it, particularly isn't it involving Nancy's father, perhaps, than we initially thought. So, yeah, I really liked it.
Yeah, her dad was not in the episode, and yet he played a very large part
Mm-hmm.
in the episode, as we learn come to find out.
Towards the end, and it's just like, so he was the lawyer that handled everything, which is something that I believe Ryan had said earlier in the season, but I did not know to the degree in which he handled things for the Hudsons.
Yeah.
It's a yikes situation, and Nancy keeps thinking that like her dad's safe, it's fine, and then someone comes to pop her bubble and to let her know, things are kind of shady actually about 20 years ago.
Yeah, the call's coming from inside the house, Nancy.
Yeah.
It's interesting because the father has been portrayed as kind of like a morally grey area for a character right from the beginning, but that was always through Nancy's eyes. You thought he was still a good man doing what he could to look after his daughter, even though he was quite flawed. Whereas now this episode, and there was another one as well, this episode's definitely cast a lot of doubt on what kind of character is he. And like Reed said, that's quite impressive that it managed to do that, considering he wasn't even in the episode.
As it's very ominous now. Like I feel uncomfortable about her father. Like I want to give him the benefit of the doubt because I'm Team Nancy and I want everything to be okay. But at the same time, it feels very much like how Ryan was reacting to, well, specifically his mom and the way that she handled things. And it's a reminder that like there are things that your parents did in the past that you might not be so happy about if you were aware of it. And in Ryan's case, it's like something's funky about what went down with his mom and Lucy because Lucy caught her cheating on her husband, which she's like, "You're in trouble." I was like, "No, ma'am, you're in trouble." You.
Wait, Ryan doesn't know yet, right? He doesn't, but Nancy does because she put it all together. It's interesting. I feel like this episode did a whole lot with Ryan kind of like deconstructing him a little bit and
Mhm.
shining a different light on him as far as the viewers are concerned. But I'm always wary of that when shows do that. We're like, for like the first few episodes, they're like the villain, and then they're like, there's more to this guy than you thought. And I'm like, I'm not going to be fully on board yet. Like, I see what you're putting down, but I'm not going to pick it up just yet.
Yeah, because there's like teen him is not adult him. And while I do
Mhm.
feel bad about like what his parents did to his relationship with Lucy and how he didn't have any control in that situation. And then to find out the girl that you really liked was murdered can be really rough. But it's been 20 years, sir, and there's 20 years of stuff that you've done in the past. So I feel sorry for 17-year-old you. Late 30s, early 40s, something you. No.
Yeah.
No, you go ahead, Michael. I was
Sure.
going to bring up something else.
No, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I agree with that, and I really like that. That yeah, he's also kind of like this morally grey character, and yeah, he's not the villain of the story, but that doesn't mean he's the hero of the story either. There's
Mhm.
definitely more to him, and I think that's instantly made him a more interesting character because yes, he had a lot of this like surface level arrogant nature about him that made him an obvious target. And I knew going into it that that meant he definitely wasn't the villain here. But now you're starting to see that he also has his own things that make him a bit of a victim, as far as the way his parents treated him, as far as the way his parents, who his parents are, and the world he was brought into. Does that make him a hero? Does that make him a likable character? No, but it does make him a very interesting one. And I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of role he plays in the story going forward, now that he may still be at the center of it, but he's not directly responsible for it.
Yeah, and now he's also being haunted by Lucy Sable.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mhm.
that's a connection that Nancy now has with him, which before she didn't see him as anything other than like this rich guy who probably killed his wife. And now she's like, hold on, he's being haunted by this ghost too. Also, this is what I was going to bring up before. The motif of Lucy like burning his ring into his finger,
Mm-hmm.
I thought
Mhm.
was a very interesting, like I haven't even unpacked what that could all mean. Maybe I'm looking too far into it, but I thought it was a really, oh my God, it was such a interesting visual and also a really good thematic element because like it ties into his wife, right? So she's like
Mhm.
burning his ring. So Nancy can see it and be like, oh, there's something here that's connecting all of this. I thought it was all well done with the burning ring. And then her kicking it into the puddle, I thought was really funny too.
Yeah.
Yeah, like is she like I wondered like is she vengeful because she did love him and he moved on? Is it that like you some whatever has happened within two important women in your life have suffered similar fates? Like
Mm-hmm.
connect the dots to how you are involved with this, Ryan. Like because Lucy might be like, look, like there's me and then there's your wife. Like wake up.
Mm-hmm.
Something's
Yeah,
not
and
right.
she left that message in the ring, the new inscription, where like the Lucy's death led to Tiffany's death. But even where we are now, and we know like what happened with Ryan's parents, it feels like we can kind of like piece together, like, oh, this kind of led to this somehow. But I know that it's not going to be that simple. There's no way. Because I
No.
was thinking about the episode, and I was like, oh, okay, I got it. And then I'm like, no, wait, hold on. It's never that easy.
But it does have something to do with the Marvins and this Hudson Marvin clash. That like they were business partners. The Bonnie Scott sunk. Um, the patriarch of the Marvins passed away. He was cheating with Ryan's mom. Like something is clearly not right between these two families. And Owen was going to use the coins to prove that I guess the Hudsons made sure the ship would fail because of his. I think that's his uncle. His uncle. I was like, so, but you're accusing the Hudsons of being willing to kill not just your uncle, but a fleet full of people. Not a fleet. Sorry, a ship full of people.
Mm.
That's heavy and a lot, and it's a large
Mhm.
accusation.
It is. And I think that played really nicely into the episode because everybody wanted the coins for different reasons. And I know we're getting to it, but that really directly impacted the Nick and Nancy conflict as well. It really did.
Oh,
Shall
can
we
we
get
get
into
into
that?
that?
Yeah,
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 Oh
let's
my
do it.
let me put my water down so we can get into this. As soon as I saw her, and I think this was earlier in the episode, when she declined that call from Nick, I was like, okay, it's going down. Ship is starting to sink. He feels so insecure in this relationship because she keeps choosing everything else than him, and she's not fully trusting him. And there's just so much to unpack that every scene that I was like, she is so confident in her own skin, and she is so independent that she doesn't think anything of declining his call. At least in my reading, that she's just like, I will get to that. I'm focused on this. But he sees things like her putting her hand on Owen's arm, or like he sees how she's acting at that party, and he's just there's such a big gulf between them that sort of is of Nancy's making. And oh my God, this relationship, I could talk about this relationship for hours because it's so fascinating to me.
It's one of the most hurtful relationships I've seen.
Sabrina's feelings are hurt.
Yes, but I think it's because they would work really well as a couple if Nancy were in a position to be a we, and she's just not. She wants to be. You could tell that, like, when she's actually with Nick, she's with Nick. But when she has to go off to do her investigating, as George points out, she's relentless. Like, she's relentlessly about digging up the truth, and she will do whatever she needs to do in order to do that. And like even if it means sidestepping his feelings for what she needs. Like, so it's very important to him to get to the bottom of what happened to Tiffany. And while that's important to Nancy, Lucy Sable is more important to her. And so that clash when she was like, I'm not going to give you the coins. And so then they have to go to the party to try to steal the coins. And then later she says something about them being a we at the end. And God bless him. She wasn't even paying attention to the fact that his eyes were red and he was crying. He was like starting to cry. And I was like, Nancy, I think he's trying to break up with you, like, right now. And you're not seeing it. And then of course, Owen shows up. And she's like, I'll handle it. And she's handling it. And I'm just like, girl, but handling it would have been sending him on his way after like a 2-minute conversation. You've probably been out here for about 10 minutes. Nick is watching you from the window. You're telling Owen that your heart belongs to Nick, but at the same time, you're rubbing Owen's shoulder with your thumb as you look up into his eyes and don't look away. Right. It's not, the signals are not, you're not giving the right signals. They're mixed signals. And I'm just like, Nick, you're gonna have to break up with her. I love her, you love her, you're gonna have to break up with her for your sanity.
That's it, because the episode really took us on quite the journey. Because when it started, Nick had told her all about how he was trailing Owen, and the two of them knew they were doing that, whereas in the previous episode it was very much left on that cliffhanger that Nick was calling Nancy and saying, be cautious of Owen, and she didn't pick up the phone. So they did have that communicative moment off screen. That did happen. So you thought they were back on track. And then as the episode went on, she kept picking anything but him, which is obviously was highlighted in the phone call. But then obviously, as you said, Reed, that it's like she was literally relentless as far as everything else except Nick. She was choosing everything else but him. And then at the end, when that everything else looked like Owen, you could see that the cracks really started to show. And even though she ultimately didn't choose him in the end, I don't think Nick's heart is in it anymore because he knows what Nancy's like.
He's stressing.
Their timing is just so deeply off. Like I don't think she's giving him what he was initially looking for. And I think she's just not prepared for that. I think she's still trying to compartmentalize things. She's like, okay, so I have my relationship over here and I'm going to do this stuff on my own here. But even though everybody else wants to join me on these missions, I know that I can do it alone, and I want to do it alone because I need to put some walls up. And that's just not beneficial to a new relationship. And I also thought I thought they were planting the seed of George and Nick.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a seed. It was like a fully bloomed flower that they then like repotted into a garden. Like, it was not a seed. I was I was like, oh, they're looking at each other. They're going to be paired up. And by the end of it, I was like, oh, there's already a connection built here. Because I mean, I knew that these two are at some point get together. And I was always like searching for how. It doesn't seem from where we are that could ever be in my mind a reality. But I know how these shows work. Like, they always just like decide to pair two characters if there's chemistry. But I didn't expect it this soon. Like I'll say it again, it just was not a seed. It was like it was a full plant that they plotted.
And that came out as a surprise to me as well, because George is growing on these people. She's starting to bond with them a lot more, but Nick's one of the ones she hasn't really had that many direct interactions with, and yet all of a sudden she's the one she was getting on the best with. So it does feel like, as you said, it's like a full-blown tree at this point. It's not, it kind of happened overnight, but like the scenes work, the actors work, gave it everything. They were great scenes, and I can absolutely see where it's going now.
Yeah, and I think that what Nancy Drew does really well is that when they're going to do pairings or people that you're supposed to be paying attention to their relationship with, like they don't tease it, they don't hint at it. We're just kind of there, and not like romantically necessarily, just that like you can see the connection building. There are two things that like, well, no, actually there were three things that like I zeroed in on, because the show does a really good job of showing, and the actors too, of showing connections. So there's when Nick and Nancy were talking about Nick like trailing Owen, and she gets excited when he says that he was stalking him, and and then her excitement goes away when he says it's not something for him. And I was like, oh, so that's like a little tiny crack. She doesn't quite like how cautious he is, but she covers it with being a little flirty. And then you have the tension between Nick and Owen when Owen calls him Nicholas, and that's not his name. And she says at the same time Nick does, but then she also watches Owen walk away in front of Nick. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, oh, girl, can we get it together? And then they all see the interaction between Nick and Nancy at the end of the episode. Like literally George and Ace look at him when she's walking away. And I was like, so George has picked up on it. Ace has picked up on it. Nancy, the fractures in your relationship, everybody else is picking up on it. Even Bess, who's distracted with Elizabeth stuff, picked up on it. And you haven't picked up on it yet. That is a warning sign. That's the like 5-alarm fire. And she's like, I don't see a blaze. We're fine.
She has tunnel vision for sure.
She does.
I think another thing that I thought was so clever, I guess, about George and Nick interacting in this episode is like we kind of see like she's providing something that is clearly missing from his relationship with Nancy. Not that it's like replaceable or anything, but like he has that like camaraderie with her that he's kind of like he felt with Nancy early on, where they were like together breaking into places and like doing all that together. And she's sort of like, as she gets deeper into this, she's kind of like pulling back and doing more things on her own. We kind of see like where George can like slide in and provide that sort of relationship, that friendship, that togetherness that Nancy's not great at the moment.
I had a question though, and it's the same point that you just made, Reed, which is, do you think in the way that they're writing these two different relationships, it's coming off to me that like George and Nick are having a conversation about like the information they find, and usually Nick and Nancy are relaying information to each other, with one of them being impressed. It doesn't always feel like a conversation. Like she's standing back and impressed by something that he figured out. He's standing back impressed by something that she figured out. But they don't always seem to be together when their discoveries.
I would say on that point, maybe there's a little bit of like a power imbalance in that particular relationship. I can't explain it more than that, but that's how I kind of like see it. Where she kind of we know Nancy's a information gatherer. She loves to get information. So I think that's maybe one of her love languages is like, oh, you found that clue.
But I think that's the interesting thing about that relationship. And I think it just says we're really, of all the things and all the conflicts and all the characters in this episode, I think we're now starting to see that it's definitely, I don't want to say that it's not Nancy, it's not Nick, it's Nancy, but it definitely is a problem on Nancy's end, and that she's having a problem connecting, because every good relationship, and maybe today the word friendship sounds a bit weird, but every good relationship has to have like a kinship or a friendship in it for it to work. And Nick and Nancy doesn't seem to have that, just the same way that you see Nancy is having a problem connecting with the other people as friends as well. It's not just Nick she's isolating, it's their entire friendship group, but obviously it's Nick who needs her more because they're actually supposed to be in a relationship. So I think the fact that George and Nick have now established that base friendship before their ultimate relationship, that's why that'll probably ultimately work better. Whereas I know a lot of Nick and Nancy happened off screen, but they never really had that friendship or that kinship to begin with. So she doesn't know how to be a friend to someone. So I think that's why she's struggling to be in a relationship with him.
That's a great point.
That maybe Nancy thinks that by keeping them out of it, she's protecting them from these things, but she doesn't communicate that well. Like if she just had like a conversation and was like, I'm gonna do this, like tell them your plan. Like in the previous episode, I remember praising how well she kind of made connections with Bess and George. Like they had that friendship moment, they had that bonding moment. And then in this episode, she kind of takes a step back from that and goes back to being guarded and not telling everybody everything and being, I don't want to say untrusting of her friends, but it comes off that way when you don't tell somebody something. They're like, oh, so you don't trust me with that?
Mhm.
And I think in her mind, she's like, I'm protecting them. But if you don't vocalize that, how do you expect them to see it? They're going to be a little bit hurt that up until this point, you are all in it together. And now you're off with the previous enemy and you're not explaining why.
And she's not used to having to explain herself. You can tell that. Like, she's used to, I found this thing, I'm going to give you the information about it. You can give me some information back that I don't know about. But this is not a partnership. Like, they always have to sort of like force the issue, or if her agenda needs additional bodies, then she's okay with having additional bodies. If it doesn't, then she's like a lone wolf and she can figure it out herself. And none of them want to do that. They want to be the true crew. They want to solve things together. And she's just not there yet. She has a lot of emotional intelligence. She doesn't have a lot of emotional intelligence when it comes to her personal relationships, which is funny because George has a lot of emotional intelligence. She just doesn't always use it. But in this episode, she did. Like, she's watching Nick the entire time. She's like, you're not 100% okay. He's like, I rounded up. It's like, no, because it's not even like you're 98% okay. You're like hovering at a 50. You're not fine with what's going on. And she connects to that and she softens to it. And that's because George is a big old softie, though she hides it. She's soft towards Bess too.
Yeah, I was going to say that when she came in and knew the exact magic words that would make Bess smile after Elizabeth left the debt. I think that was one of the most impressive moments for me, because this was a big George episode, even though it wasn't a George episode. So I think if they've accomplished that they hit the nail on the head there. I'm very happy with where George is as a character, especially after the journey she's had over the last couple of episodes.
She's such a standout. And I feel like with each episode, we get like more and more of how, I'm going to make this prediction now. I think she's the glue that holds the group together, or will become the glue that holds the group together.
She's the one that'll whip them into shape. She's the natural leader, whereas Nancy thinks she is, but it's like, it's George. She runs the claw with an iron fist.
She does, and poor inventory day did not get done.
No,
but maybe they'll do it when they have like only one customer in the claw. I did love that Elizabeth mentioned that. She's like,
not Elizabeth dragging them. It's like, that was not necessary. And Paul, can I just say justice for Ace a little bit in this episode? He was the waiter, he was the chauffeur. Right. He did cut the power at the big mansion, which was immediately turned back on. But I was like, why does Ace have to be the chauffeur? But he loves being the silly guy. But I was like, come on, we need more Ace. Maybe that's just me.
It was an Ace light episode, which is why there was also, I believe, no Nace. So there's no Nace watch. This review, but he was a very solid Patanker for Bess, who was freaking out about this. I still really
love their dynamic so much.
It's so sweet.
And I think more so than like the mystery, I'm really looking forward, because what we've really connected with and what we talk about the most is like Nancy's development. So I think that's another thing that I'm like, as much as I want to know like the truth of the mystery, like I really want to see her growth and see her start to cool down and let more people in. I think that's what I'm looking forward to.
Definitely.
Same. Because there's that great conversation between her and Nick where she asks him to trust her and he asks her to trust him and let him in. And she says soon, which is, I've never heard anyone do that.
No. Oh my gosh. Nancy.
And he's just supposed to be okay. And I think one of the things maybe that season 1 is going to cover is that you cannot put people on your timetable of growth. That's not how that works. It's not. And I think she's going to have to learn that the hard way, unfortunately.
And she'll deserve it.
She will.
Nancy. Love you so much, girl, but you need a rude awakening.
She does. And she'll probably get one, I guess, coming soon. But we'll be Team Nancy forever. Nick break up with her. Hey, so since we are on a Nancy Drew journey, you guys, we are doing a special giveaway of all 3 seasons of Nancy Drew on DVD. And for the information on this contest, please go to our Twitter. We are at the CW Spiral, and you'll find a pinned tweet with everything that you have to do in order to get into the contest.
Let's go, Drew Crew.
Woo woo.